And hello again, and welcome to this discussion, which the syllabus says is market segmentation. And actually, the syllabus says it's market segmentation because in reality, it's segmentation, targeting, and positioning. But those are all big words, and they take up lots of space in a syllabus. And market segmentation is so much more concise than just segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And if I use the acronym STP, then people would be going, "What the heck is he talking about?" So again, in this discussion, we're going to look at segmentation, we're going to look at targeting, we're going to look at positioning, and they occur in that sequence, and there should be kind of a method to the madness, right? You're doing the segmentation because you're trying to figure out, what segments exist, and then targeting is like, okay, so now that we figured out which segments exist, which segment or segment should we pursue as an organization, and then once we figured out which segment or segment to pursue, then we got to figure out a way to kind of differentiate ourselves, our organization, with the segment or segments that we have selected to pursue. Okay, so let me put my handy dandy glasses on, and before we get any further, it's important to understand that differentiation is important, right? Positioning is important, but the positioning, right? The positioning should be based on the segmentation. And you're probably sitting there saying to yourself, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And let me give you a relatively recent example of companies that attempted to differentiate. And it's not clear that the differentiation was done because of segmentation perspective. It was just differentiation done to differentiate as opposed to identifying a meaningful segment. I mean, you may or may not, and it's okay if you don't, you may or may not remember 3-liter soda bottles. And I want to say, between 10 and 15 years ago, both Pepsi and Coke decided that for whatever reason, the world needed 3-liter soda bottles, and they were not successful, right? The 3-liter soda bottle was not successful. And one of the reasons was practical. All right, one of the reasons, quite honestly, was practical is that and this is where companies didn't do their homework. Okay, the 3-liter soda bottle didn't fit in a lot of refrigerators. That could be a problem. Second reason that the 3-liter soda bottles weren't successful is that there really wasn't a large enough group of customers who were interested in 3-liter soda bottles. And the logic was this. Look, people are buying 1-liter soda bottles and people are buying 2-liter soda bottles. And if you add 1 and 2 together, that's 3. And if they buy 1-liter soda bottles and 2-liter soda bottles, then, logic says that 1 plus 2 is 3. They'll buy 3-liter soda bottles. In reality, they didn't. And again, one reason was they didn't fit in in many of the refrigerators that existed. But again, right, the differentiation that was done in that case was done kind of more to differentiate rather than differentiating because both Coke and Pepsi thought that there was this substantial segment of customers that could make a 3-liter soda bottle workable. All right, so again, we're going to look at segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And the first step is segmentation. And segmentation is simple enough. Segmentation simply refers to, let me put my handy dandy glasses on, dividing larger markets into smaller groups based on shared characteristics, needs, or buying styles, right? So you divide larger markets into smaller groups based on shared characteristics, needs, or buying styles. So a real simple way to think of it is, there's 7 million, there's 7 billion people, a little over 7 billion people in the world. One way to segment them is male and female. There we go, right? So roughly, half the people in the world are male, half the people in the world are female. right? So there we go. We've taken a larger market, right, 7.4 billion, and sliced it up into basically 3.7 billion and 3.7 billion, right? So again, what we're doing is we're taking larger markets and putting them into breaking them into smaller groups based on some sort of shared characteristics, needs, or buying styles. And there's a number of different ways that markets can be segmented. Your book, delineates several segmentation approaches, right? So they can be markets can be segmented, as I mentioned just a minute ago. They can be segmented based on gender. And they can be markets can be segmented based on geography. So to give you an example of that, one of the things that when I walk into the Walmarts down here in Florida, where I'm now living, I'm not going to see once we start to get to October, let's say, I'm not going to see a preponderance of snow shovels or heavy gloves, or snow scrapers, or ice removal equipment, or stuff like that. Alternatively, what I might see, because I'm in Florida, is I might see a year-round stocking of stocking, right? Stocking meaning inventory, year-round inventory of sun-related or beach-related products. So that would be an example of segmentation based on based on geography. And again, the book again has other methods that it talks about. It talks about geography, demography, psychographic, benefits, and behavioral. And if you one of the nice things about the geographic and the demographic stuff is that segmentation that's relatively easily done. You can get a lot of that information. Right, a lot of the demographic, a lot of the geographic information that can be gleaned from secondary data, the stuff that we talked about within the in the marketing research study. So that's easily enough done. Some of the other types, the psychographic and the benefits and the behavioral segmentation, that's where the marketing research would come in. To establish segments, because what you're going to have to do, for example, with benefit segmentation, is as a marketer, you would need to understand, why people are buying products. Now that might seem really simple, but one of the examples I've liked to use for years about this is, when I was really young, the way you differentiated toothpaste was whether or not it had fluoride or not. And now, if you think about toothpaste, right, what marketers learned through the years, what the Colgate Palmolives and the Procter and Gamble's learned through the years, is that people buy toothpaste for different reasons, right? Their benefits of what they're doing. So some people are looking for white teeth, some people are looking for fresh breath, some people are looking for plaque removal and things of that nature, right? Some people are looking for taste. So these are all types of benefits, and those can be incorporated into the product. And so no longer are you just basically differentiating your product on the basis of whether or not it has fluoride, but rather, what kind of benefits people are seeking, right? Fresh breath or clean teeth, or like I said, reduced plaque, things of that nature. Okay, so we've talked about segmentation, and again, segmentation is the idea that we're taking larger markets and we're breaking them into smaller markets based on some shared characteristics, needs, or buying styles. Once we've developed or once we've determined what the segments are, then the targeting component comes in. And targeting refers to evaluating the segments and deciding which one or which ones to pursue. And your book has an exhibit, and I'm hoping that it's still exhibit 9.5. It's 9.5 in the 5th edition. I know some of you have the 6th edition, but it's labeled the evaluation of segment attractiveness. And what that does is it gives you an idea as to what kinds of things organizations can look at when they're attempting to determine which segment or which segments that they want to pursue. And so, one of the components involves the size of the segment. And so, for example, pardon me while I have a little bit of have some Diet Coke in here. One of the reasons that China and India are such popular countries for marketers to think about engaging with is because if you look at the two countries, they account for approximately 1/3 of the world's population, right? 30%, roughly between 30 and 33% of the world's population. Right? There's like 1.4 billion people in China, and there's about 1.3 billion people in India. Like I said, there's about 7.4 billion people on the face of the earth. So you have two countries, right? And there's over 200 distinct countries in the world. You got two countries and two countries that are in relatively close geographic proximity that account for, roughly 1/3 of the world's population. That becomes an attractive market, and with both India and China in particular, becoming a much wealthier country, right? That means that people have income to buy a variety of different kinds of products, and so again, these countries become very attractive, right? So, again, one aspect is in terms of attractiveness involves the size of the segment. A second criteria that can be used to evaluate a segment involves the segment's profitability. And one of the things you want to look at with a segment is not only its current profitability, but its prospective profitability going forward. And this alludes back to one of the things that I talked about in an earlier discussion, and that's the idea that in today's world, it's not uncommon for traditional aged undergraduates, basically 18 to 24-year-olds are what are considered to be traditional aged undergraduates. It's not uncommon for traditional aged undergraduates to have revolving credit cards, a MasterCard or a Visa card. And again, it was very uncommon, when I was an undergraduate student, and part of the reason was that the companies were very hesitant to extend us credit because we're college students and we didn't have large sources of income, and as a result, we couldn't be very profitable. But what marketers and what organizations started to realize is, yeah, that is true, but kind of if you get them when they're younger, right, and you become acclimated, right, to, let's say, to using a credit card, you might not be a real profitable customer at age 20 or 21, when maybe you're making $20,000, and that might be that somebody might go, hey, sign me up for $20,000. But you might have a nice PAN internship or whatever, and you might be making $20,000, which sounds really wonderful, but that's not really where you're headed. But think of the kinds of things that could happen if we could, as an organization, if we could get you in as a customer early on, when you're not, when you don't have a lot of money necessarily, and when you're not necessarily going to be as profitable as maybe when you're making 200,000, or in some cases, and this is what we're hoping, you go to John Carroll. I know maybe one or two of you don't go to John Carroll, but that's okay. Right? You're making a couple of million a year. All of a sudden, your profitability is a whole different ballgame. So again, there are different ways to evaluate the attractiveness of the segments that have been delineated. My age group, for example, right? That's my age group, which is I think I may have mentioned in an earlier lecture. I'm going to be 64 in another month approximately. And so one of the nice things about my age group is that people in my kind of social, yeah, anyway, my demographics, some of us may have a fair amount of money. The problem is, we're not going to be around for that, for that much longer. You guys, on the other hand, you might not have as much money, but you've got, 3/4, if not more, of your life ahead of you. So there we go. We've had a little bit of fun with numbers. So we've talked about segmentation. We've talked about targeting. And what this sets us up to do is, once we as an organization have decided which segments that we are going to, or which segment we are going to target, then the positioning comes in. And I'm going to read something from the book. And so market positioning involves a process of defining the marketing mix variables so that target customers have a clear, distinctive, desirable understanding of what the product does or represents in comparison with competing products. So again, market positioning involves a process of defining the marketing mix variables, right? The 4 Ps: product, place, price, promotion, so that target customers have a clear, distinctive, desirable understanding of what the product does or represents in comparison with competing products. And as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, that's kind of where the differentiation comes in. But again, in the STP model, the differentiation is coming because of the fact that we've looked at the market, we've segmented the market, we've decided which segment or segments we're going to choose, and now what we're trying to do is we're trying to differentiate because we have a specific target or targets in mind, and we want to be able to differentiate our organization's offerings from those offerings of other organizations. Right. And so there are different ways, as the book points out, there are different ways of differentiating products. One involves the value proposition that the book talks about. And so, why are so many people, and particularly younger people, and I'm not casting aspersions, but why are so many people, particularly younger people, millennials, why are they so passionate about Apple products? Right? What is it that Apple has done? What is Apple's value proposition? And you start to think about, right? There's both kind of tangible and intangible things that Apple has. Right? I mean, tangible in the sense that we can look and say, okay, an iPhone has these attributes, and there's this much memory, and the screen size is whatever, right? And blah, 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 right? Those are kind of tangible things. But what about intangible things? It's like you see somebody with an Apple, and if I ask you to start playing word association game, right? See, I do the word association thing. You see a person driving a Buick, play word association. Oftentimes you see somebody driving a Buick, you go old, right? There you go. So you see somebody with an Apple product and maybe you go young, youthful, sophisticated, technologically savvy, right? That's the kind of stuff. It's not necessarily a tangible thing, but basically what you have is this value proposition that Apple seems to do a really nice job with creating some really passionate customers. So one way that organizations can differentiate themselves is based on a value proposition. Another way, and there are a number of different ways. Another involves symbols, right? And so one of the examples that I like to use is with symbols, and you might want to think about this is. If you think about McDonald's, I was going to say Ronald McDonald, but if you think about Ronald McDonald, what does Ronald McDonald signify, right, or symbolize, right? You say, okay, I got that. Now, what does Burger King symbolize, right? Not Burger King the company, but Burger King that creature, right, kind of thing. And if you particularly if young people, right, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, right, they look at Ronald McDonald and they probably see some creature that looks really friendly and stuff like that. Ronald McDonald's a big goofy looking clown, right? And if you look at Burger King's a big, goofy looking clown. But for whatever reason, right, Ronald McDonald has ended up perceiving, he's seen as much more warm and fuzzy and embracing and come to McDonald's kind of thing than the Burger King. The Burger King dude scares the hell out of kids. Right. And so you have this interesting dynamic where again, I mean, maybe that's what you're trying to do. I mean, I don't know. But the studies that have been done on kind of like, kids' perception of Ronald McDonald versus kids' perception of Burger King, the caricature and not necessarily the physical store itself is really kind of fascinating. So we've talked about, in this discussion, we've talked about segmentation, we've talked about targeting, we've talked about positioning. And I hope you've learned something, and I've given you some, no pun intended, when we're talking about McDonald's and Burger King. Hope I've given you some food for thought. See you down the road. Bye.